Welcome to the Hop Edition podcast, brought to you in association with The Malt Miller, your go-to choice for premium homebrewing ingredients and equipment. Whether you're a beginner starting out or an experienced brewer, The Malt Miller has got you covered. So for top quality products and customer service, jump over to themaltmiller.co.uk and tell them the Hop Edition sent you. We would also like to thank all our Patreons for their continued support with running and developing the pod. If you would like to become a member and gain access to exclusive perks and benefits, head over to patreon.com/The Hop Edition. Now it's time to get this pod started, so crack open a homebrew and enjoy the episode.
There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 111 of the Hop Edition podcast. Tonight, we're talking to Phil from Simple Things Fermentations, enjoying some of his exceptional beers and discussing brewing north of the wall in sunny Glasgow. Now, we'd like to say a big thanks to our partner sponsor, the Malt Miller, the premier supplier of all things homebrew. Swing by their website to check out the great range in stock, and while you're there, check out the Hop Edition recipe section where you can find a range of beers from the podcast, including creations from previous podcast guests. Right, guys, everyone say hello, and say hello, Phil.
Hello, Phil.
Hello. All right.
Like Simon says.
I know. Phil, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about STF?
Sure. So my name is Phil Sisson, and I am the founder and owner of Simple Things Fermentations, which is a small brewery based in the south side of Glasgow. I started in 2019, December 2019. Well, that was when I sold the first beers.
I was there.
Right, were you?
I was. Yeah.
Right. Ah, there you go. Right. Can't get those anymore.
We've got the little
Craftmaster one.
Yeah.
Great glass.
Because you were doing the little 2-packs, I think.
That's right, yeah.
It was like November or something like that, maybe. Was it
early
November,
maybe?
Yeah, maybe December, yeah.
The timeline was I left, so I did the Heriot Watt thing, moved up from London, did Heriot Watt, did 2 years at Harveston, left Harveston at the end of August 2019, moved into the brewery, which I'd already had since about May, I think. I took the lease, and I'd got the floor kind of sorted out, put a drain in, and
the cold room as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I had all the sort of brew kit sort of standing around, and from September through to December, put the kit together, made 2 beers, and got them on sale. Well, I did that event, which I think was like early December.
It's really cool.
And then I got into the first sort of few shops, sort of mid-December, I suppose, really, just in time for Christmas. And then kind of thought, right, great. Well, that's those 2 done. Away we go. And obviously, March 2020, everything went kind of bonkers, and it's only just kind of now 5 years later starting to feel like things are becoming somewhat like a normal business, really, I suppose. It's been a bit of a ride, but Simple Things, we make a range of beers. Like the range that we do is a big part of the kind of the brand and the philosophy. We try to do the sort of things that you don't see so much. That's what we kind of did more or less exclusively. A couple of years ago, I kind of realized that we didn't have to not do the kind of hazy pales. Which again kind of came back to the kind of lockdown type stuff. Just needing to kind of keep, everything became a lot tighter money wise. So it's like, right, well, we need to keep the lights on. We need to remain in business. So let's actually do the brewing beer with Citra thing, and I'm glad we did, because we're going to be drinking one tonight, the US Pale. It's like a straight up American hopped hazy pale, and it's one of our most successful beers, and certainly it was one of my favorite beers.
Because you brew a lot with New Zealand as well, do you not?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm sure I was at the Paisley Beer Festival.
Right.
And I was chatting to you, and I'm sure you had a few New Zealand ones on tap that were exceptional, really,
nice
really
one.
good.
Yeah, well, we do US Pale and NZ Pale, and we sort of alternate them, basically. It's the same beer, 4.8%, same grain bill, same everything.
Nice.
But with the US Pale, obviously, it's American hops, and the NZ Pale, it's New Zealand hops. But yeah, that was a sort of thing a couple of years ago, realizing we could do that and still do all the other stuff. And I suppose that the kind of thing that makes us a little bit different across the board is everything's naturally carbonated. So whether it's can, keg, or cask, it's all primed and re-fermented, and that's how we achieve the carbonation in whatever packaging that we do.
That's one of the questions we actually had for you was just on how do you actually do that? Is that done in can, or are you doing it in a bright tank, or what? How is it?
It's all done in the can. Yeah, it's homebrew kind of tactics, really. You know, it's making
kind of kernel.
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's right. So we have a kind of pretty tight control on the amount of prime, what we put in the priming solution, which includes CBC1 yeast, because that helps us with the consistency. You just know that it's all going to kind of go the way you want it to go. And I suppose the other big thing is making sure that you've hit terminal gravity before you do anything, so you know exactly how much you're going to end up with, because you're starting from zero bombs. Kind of thing. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So they're the kind of two main things, really. And Ewan so after a year, I got Ewan in, who was an ex-colleague from Harveston, and he's been basically in charge of and doing most of the production stuff ever since he joined. He's kind of quite a sort of cautious person, rightly so, in that job. So he started off at, I think it's like 4 grams a litre for the priming solution. And he's sort of gradually easing it up. So if there's a beer that we want it to be particularly kind of lively, we've just done a Hefeweizen, and he'll allow that to be like up to 4.4 grams a litre. But yeah, he's not for sort of being wild on that. When we were doing bottles, and when I was doing it myself, and it was going into bottles as opposed to cans, I just did everything at 7 grams per litre. He was, there was no way he was doing anything like that. But it works out great. People do quite interesting thing. Really, is the way that people perceive the carbonation, because it is, if you went by volumes of CO2, it's kind of roughly equivalent to what you get in lots of other kind of forced carbonated beers.
Yeah,
but because the bubbles are smaller, and people perceive it as being flatter, basically, and that is something that we kind of come up against a little bit.
Is that right?
Not that it bothers us particularly, but you do sort of see it in the Untapped comments and things like that. And the other thing that is kind of interesting, if the head doesn't, like, if the foam isn't retained so well for whatever reason, people definitely associate that with you can have a sort of fizzy beer, but if the foam dies away, then people perceive it as flat. There's a whole kind of world of how fizziness is perceived that I think somebody could do a PhD on. It'd be quite an interesting one.
I guess that's something we could talk about with this first beer that we've got in the glass here, because obviously that's the Bohemian Pilsner. I think it's already been up on the screen, but for the benefit of anyone who's sort of just listening or can't see that, we're drinking the Pilsner first, and then we're going to have the US Pale, the Pale Ale, and, well, if we have time, and then the Porter at the end. So basically in order of ABV. But yeah, this is very nice. The Pilsner is lovely, really good, kind of bready, kind of classic Czech Pils kind of.
It's got a nice
to it.
It's that nice sulphur note with the lager as well, isn't it?
But good hop presence as well. And talking about the carbonation, as you've just mentioned, I mean, you can see there is, bubbles streaming up on it, but it does have quite a nice sort of
very fine,
gentle, soft kind of carbonation. So maybe there's something to it with this this idea of sort of natural carbonation and all the rest of it. But I mean, I wouldn't say it's undercarbed at all. Really, it's just does have a sort of gentle mouthfeel to it rather than like a really fizzy kind of.
Oh, that's the idea.
Expect from like a macro, kind of lager off of a tap or whatever. So I like it. Don't know.
It works in two ways. It means that we can keep things simple as per the the whole idea. We don't have to have kind of expensive tanks and chilling equipment to get things down to sort of 0 degrees to be able to package it. Already
got some
carbonated.
Technical insight in the comments there from Liam as well.
Right, there you go. But the main reason we do it is because we prefer it flavor-wise.
Yes,
like you said, the Colonel does it. Lots of Belgian breweries do it, and it's for good reason. Champagne, is successful, and they're the kind of main, I suppose, most famous kind of proponents of this method of carbonation. I think the smaller, finer carbonation allows the flavor to come through more. You don't get that sort of carbonic bite, which sometimes you wouldn't. In a can of Coke, it's great to have that kind of thing. And certainly it's not a bad thing in lots of beers as well. But for our beer, I like the fact that it doesn't have so much of that. And you do tend to find that the beer flavors, the sort of delicate nuances a little bit come through more clearly, I think, without that masking things,
Yeah.
So that's it. That's the main reason we do it.
So we've got a few people following on in the chat, and there's a couple of questions sort of popping up already. I think I read this on the website because I was checking out the beers in advance, but Brett has obviously asked what yeast it is. It's 802, is it?
It's the Budovic, which I'm guessing is the Budvar strain. Yeah, so it's a Czech.
Which I know that Brett has used quite a bit himself as well.
There you go.
Right. I don't know if he picked up on that, but
right.
Yeah, so obviously very traditional yeast, and it's all SARS as well in this.
It's all SARS, yeah.
Any decoction mashing? Did you go that far with it? Or
no, we didn't. We don't have the. We've got a pretty simple set of equipment. It's a Dave Porter kit. It's an ale kit basically. So I suppose this kind of gives a little bit of a background to the beer. I got the kit, and I wasn't 100% confident that it would be suitable for brewing lagers with, frankly. But again, going back to the lockdown thing, I within a couple of months of that happening, I found that, contrary to the original idea for the brewery, which was to do sort of different kind of underrepresented styles, and I sort of foresaw those going to sort of beer nerds here, there, and everywhere, people who would be interested in having a grisette or a whatever it may be. And I sort of always envisioned whatever the word is, the beer going to sort of the far and wide across the UK kind of thing. But actually what happened was, with lockdown, everybody went to their kind of local thing. You saw huge queues outside of butchers and bike shops and all the rest of it. And the same thing happened to us. We had the whole of Muir End and Shorelands coming to us for beer, which was brilliant. But what they wanted was lager. Obviously, it's Glasgow. And so that kind of was a fairly big prompt for me to try and make a lager with the Dave Porter kit. And
you've got the water.
Yeah, right. So my kind of safety net, I suppose, was to do a dry hop lager, because I thought I'll kind of paper over the whatever cracks there may be with a dry hopping kind of thing. So that was Twisted Pilsner. I know with Harveston, I'd been fortunate enough to be taken by Charles Ferrum to Czech Republic and then Slovenia, and I went to the Hop Research Institute at the Czech Republic, and obviously a lot of SARS chat, and the guy introduced me to Kazbek, which is like a sort of cousin or sibling of Sarts. and but it's much more sort of, I don't know, potent, basically. You've got a lot of the same kind of things going on, loads of citrus, really lemony. And I came home, brewed with it as a sort of home brew. I really, really liked it. So I was like, right, I'm going to do a proper Czech lager, starts in the boil, Czech yeast, Bohemian Pilsner malt, and I'll do the kind of Kazbek as the dry hop. And the first brew I did, Kazbek's a really kind of punchy hop, and it came across like more sort of pale ale-y. So I dialed it back and kept on dialing it back, and now it's like a gram a litre or something. It's barely any in there. But Twisted Pilsner is still like it's our biggest selling beer to this day, and it goes really well. So Bohemian Pilsner is basically that beer, but without the Twisted Pilsner, because over the course of the kind of 2 or 3 years or whatever it was, we did this at the other lager and got to realize that we did have the right equipment, even though it's not technically the right equipment. We are able to make a good lager with the brew house and the tanks that we've got. It's not really so much about the decoction machine and the horizontal tanks and all the rest of it. It's just all the usual stuff, attention to detail and the right ingredients and giving it the time. If you do all those things and pay attention to, all the usual sort of brewing stuff, then it's perfectly possible to brew a decent lager.
Yeah. So what kind of malt's in this, Phil?
It's Bohemian Pilsner malt, so it's
the Vermin.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Which I think is from. I think it's probably grown in Czech Republic, but probably malted in Bamberg. I think that's kind of how it goes. So it's Czech malt, but via Germany, I think.
We love it. We're all big fans of the Vermin Bohemian Pilsner malt.
Great stuff.
I don't think there's a better malt out there, is there? For this style,
for this sort of thing. Yeah, we use
it's expensive, but
yeah, it is. But I mean, I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch, but malt and certainly hops, I don't ever sort of try to cut costs on those, because as a proportion of the final cost of the beer, it's nothing really, So we'll always use the best malt we can lay our hands on. It's so important. Like on the pale ale side of things, we always use Maris Otter, whether it's extra pale or just regular. And one time we got sent by accident the sort of crisp pale instead of the Maris Otter pale, and the difference was huge. It was it was like this one-dimensional thing compared to the usual thing, which is this beautiful, rounded, complex affair. So it was quite a sort of fortunate thing, because we'll never go back to anything less than the premium malt. So important.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it really is like German purity law type thinking, isn't it? It's just if you get the water, the grain, the hops, and the yeast right, you're going to make good beer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's quite an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because particularly a lot of homebrewers might sort of think pale ale malts are going to be a bit interchangeable, and I can save 10 quid getting the bog standard sort of pale ale versus a Maris Otter or a Golden Promise or something like that, then I'll do that. But actually, the last guest we had on was making his pale ales, which are very hoppy beers, with extra pale Maris Otter as well. And we all commented on how nice, the depth of sort of malt flavour in them was, despite them being obviously very hop forward beers. So
it's huge. Definitely don't go for anything less than the best, because as I say, when you add it all up, it's the difference between second best and the best is nothing. Even if you're only making 20-30 litres, it's well worth paying the most you can, for sure.
Was it like 5 pence a pint or something?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never worked it out, but it's not a lot. It really isn't a lot.
Pennies on the pint.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a great beer, Phil. I'm really enjoying it.
No, I'm really impressed.
It's beautiful.
With this as well.
That's
very nice.
And I think it's just like, don't mess with what is a lovely, simple, approach to a beer. Difficult to brew technically, but very few ingredients to create an absolutely beautiful beer. I know SARS hops seems to be something that is becoming increasingly difficult to get hold of. Possibly less for a brewery. I noticed last time I tried to order some, I couldn't get any, and I ended up ordering Sarza instead.
Oh, right.
Has anyone else tried Sarza or knows much about it?
No, I've not tried that.
I've only seen that as the kind of cryo or Lupamax version of SARS, but I don't know whether it's just the same thing and they're just calling it something different or
Was
what.
it grown
But
somewhere else? Maybe SARS grown in a different country.
I was a bit confused about
Germany
that.
or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I was a bit confused about that as well.
Yeah. Because, Phil, is it leaf or pellet that you're using as well?
So this is leaf. So again, with the kit that we've got, we always use leaf in the boil and then dry hop with pellet. And so yeah, this is all leaf starts. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Always quite.
We can get Sats all right, I think, but Kazbek not so much. So that's a bit of a concern. Just it's not being used by enough people, which is a real shame because it's a great hop. We actually did a collab with Abyss, and basically the beer that we did was the sort of turbocharged version of Twisted Pilsner. So we just amped everything up, and we put loads of Kazbek in it, and it was fantastic. It's got a really nice sort of hops. I think it's more about what hops don't have. You know, like a lot of certainly the sort of modern English stuff I'm not a mega fan of. I think there's lots of nice flavors in there, but there's also still stuff in there that I'm not so keen on, and that's something that Charles Farm and I'll always disagree on because they're quite big on pushing the sort of modern English stuff. But
yeah, they're trying to obviously stop the decline of hop production in the UK, so they're trying to move things.
Yeah, and I get that, and there are nice beers made with it. It's just not for me particularly. But the old, I think they could carry on being as proactively encouraging of the English hop scene with exactly. I suppose you've got challenges there with sort of disease resistance
and stuff,
the agronomics and stuff. But there's some great traditional British English hop varieties. Ernest we use a fair bit. That's a really great hop. And Kazbek obviously is not English, but it's got a similar kind of thing. It's got loads going for it, and it doesn't really have anything not going for it. So there's some fantastic varieties out there from Europe, but you've got to sort of look for them a little bit and find the right beers to put them in.
Yeah, exactly.
All a matter of experimentation.
Absolutely.
Shall we move on to the US Pale?
Sure.
Definitely.
Actually got this one.
Whilst we're tracking that, Phil, your website mentions Radical Brewing as the inspiration for the brewery, which is a great book. What else have you drawn on to inspire your recipes and your general approach to brewing? Your philosophy, I picked up from what you mentioned earlier, was a desire to do a lot of experimental stuff, probably avoiding the proven model of hazy beers. So yeah, what's kind of inspired your range of beers?
So yeah, Radical Brewing was the original kind of jumping off point, I suppose, really. Just reading that and realizing how many different possibilities there are for brewing aside from the ones that you see the whole time, and it seemed common sense that people would be interested in drinking some of the other possibilities that are out there. So that was where we kind of set out, really, I suppose. But other inspirations, suppose I kind of obviously come from northwest of England, so cask beer has always been a big thing. I got into that sort of fairly early on in my drinking career. So I guess that couples with the natural carbonation thing a little bit, but also the types of beer that we do and the types of flavor that we kind of aim for, and that maybe connects to the Maris Otter and whatnot. Having a good sort of firm foundation under whatever it is you do, not being, I mean, balance, I suppose, is the word. It's a bit of a cliche in brewing, but those kind of traditional cask ales and sort of bottle conditioned beers that you see on UK beer shop shelves, it's all, the best ones are all really well balanced, and that's something that we always kind of aim to do. We're not really out to just kind of overload in any one particular area, sort of thing. So I suppose being a little bit off of the beaten track, but not too far, and also just well balanced beer that you kind of want to drink loads of, as opposed to the kind of, I'll have a sip and get my kind of socks blown off, but maybe not want to drink the entire thing. That's not really our...
And that's the stuff we like to brew as well, to be fair. When you're brewing that kind of for home brewer, that is like having that sort of drinkability is key. That sort of 4 or 5% kind of
when
range.
You know you've got a whole keg of it to work through as well. It's kind of isn't it? Like, how fast am I going to be able to drink 19 litres of extreme, beer or whatever?
Yeah.
I do wonder if that's part of the reason why, as home brewers, we tend to also buy quite a lot of commercial beer.
Because
is you can go and buy that crazy beer because it's only going to be like 1 or 2 cans of it.
Correct, yeah.
But the stuff you want to brew is going to be, it needs to be
something
for
sure.
You want to drink. No,
I mean, I don't think realistically I'm ever going to think it's a good idea to brew a triple IPA or something like that and have a whole keg of it at home, just because it would be suicidal for a start, but also I don't want to be drinking.
But then we still we'll still do an imperial stout or something like that, Tricky.
Well, that's a bit different though, isn't it? Because you can sit on that one for that's probably going to get better the longer you leave it. Whereas like a really hoppy beer, even if it is quite strong, is probably going to start going downhill fairly soon. Certainly before you've drunk much of it, unless you're a raging alcoholic. But each to their own.
Our good friend Dave Goddard, who we had on the podcast a few episodes ago, made a triple IPA recently, 10.5%. So I'm looking forward to trying that.
You just need to share that out.
He's very good. He tends to share his beer.
Yeah, funny enough.
I mean, if you've got a very well-attended home brew club, it's not as much of a problem, is it?
Or thirsty friends. Thirsty friends. Yeah. So, Phil, just coming back to your kind of, I guess, your origins and the philosophy around experimentation, what are some of the more wild beers that you've got under your belt?
You've done some.
Well, yeah, I mean, depends what you call wild, really. Like the peated pale, I always think is a pretty good one to put out there, because it's not like the only time anybody's ever brewed a peated pale, but it's not like you see them every day. And it's such a simple, it's a really easy beer to make, and it's a significantly different to most other beer. It gets this lovely kind of fruity, slightly phenolic thing, all from just a little bit of an addition of a specialty grain in the malt. It doesn't cost very much, doesn't take any extra skill or anything, but you get this really quite different beer. So that kind of shows the sort of thing we try to do as well as anything, I suppose. It's not about being kind of wild and crazy. It's just about opening your mind a little bit and going, well, what are the possibilities that are out there that maybe aren't going to be too challenging, So that's a sort of reasonable example. Then on the kind of more esoteric type stuff. We do some mixed firm stuff. We have a range called Wild Style, and that's we do like smaller batches. It's like between 200 and 600 liters, depending on what we're doing. We've done one a few times now, which is like every May we pick spruce tips. Basically, we go up to the local wind farm, actually, Whiteley Wind Farm.
Whiteley,
it's a huge kind of, I don't know if it
it's like it is massive.
It must
like
be
one
a
of
forest, right?
I think it's like one of the biggest at Whiteley, but
it's ginormous,
yeah,
and it's pretty much all spruce trees, so you can kind of pick spruce tips to your heart's content in May.
Yeah.
So we do an 80 shilling with spruce tips in it, and then we take off a portion of that, and we have like a sort of house mixed firm sort of culture.
Nice.
And we put that aside for a year. And
an oak?
No, in plastic.
Right, okay.
Because there's enough going on already. You don't need oak. It would possibly just be too much if you had certainly any kind of spirit character would be inappropriate really, and I don't know, a bit of oak might be okay, but it doesn't need it. Basically, there's already an awful lot happening in that beer. So you take it out a year later, and it's got this kind of sour cola cube thing going on, like the citrus from the spruce, and the sort of caramel from the malt, because obviously an 80 is quite a sort of sweet caramelly thing. That's basically Coca-Cola, is it's caramel and lemon kind of thing. So you get that, but you also get this kind of Bretty thing. You sort of still pick up the malt. Part of the kind of the origins of the sort of house culture that we use was some Orval dregs, and you definitely still get a bit of that kind of Orval thing in there. So that's on the kind of properly more wild sort of end of things.
I love that.
Yeah, and we sort of, we have a few.
When do you release that, Phil?
It varies up really. I think the next one that we do, we might keep till before Christmas. In fact, I think last year we did it in like November or something. So it's quite Christmassy. You get the sort of spruciness, and there's a bit of a Christmassy vibe to it. So
have you got any left?
There are some bottles on our shop actually. Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, there we go.
So on this theme of the sort of wild or experimental beers, we can take this one back to sort of much earlier in your journey, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about Raindrops on Roses.
Right.
What happened with that particular beer?
So that was where it all began in some ways, really, because that was a homebrew competition that Thornbridge did in association with Waitrose, and I'd done a wit with rose petals, which I did kind of for my wife's birthday or something, because she likes a wit, and she likes, well, actually, I'm not sure she does like rose petals, but anyway, she likes a wit, and without really overthinking it, I that's the beer I kind of came up with, and she really liked it. This competition came along, and she was like, "Oh, you should enter that." And I didn't really like it, frankly. Or it was all right, but it wasn't like my favorite beer that I'd ever brewed by a long way.
Yeah.
But when somebody says you should give it a go, then you give it a go. And I remember I put it into like the Duvel bottles, so it looked really nice. And I sort of hand wrote some tags, and I remember thinking that does actually look pretty cool. And I had to race to like a post office way over the other side of town because it was a bank holiday, and I hadn't realized. So it was like I had basically 2 hours to get to the post office, or it wasn't going to make it on time. So I did all that, and then didn't really think anything more of it. And alongside that, obviously that was a period of a few weeks, and it just happened to overlap with me starting at Harriet Watt. So I started at Harriet Watt, and I was in there for like 2 or 3 weeks or something, and I got a phone whilst I was like in the lab or whatever, and it was from somebody at Thornbridge saying I'd won this competition, and I couldn't believe it. I'd like pretty much forgotten about it. I had zero expectation of winning, but I wasn't allowed to tell anyone until it was announced, which was like 3 or 4 months or something. So I did like a third of the course or something, having won this competition without being able to say anything. And then it was announced, and I was in every Waitrose shop in the UK. And obviously I went from some kind of quiet guy at the back to the guy who won the kind of homebrew competition. So yeah, no, that was that beer. And obviously it kind of gave me a huge boost of confidence apart from anything else, and allowed me to go and brew it at Thornbridge, which was a really fascinating thing to do as well. Obviously so early in the brewing career, to go and have a look at how they did it. And I suppose I sort of knew enough that I was able to sort of get quite a lot of useful stuff from that day. It wasn't all just sort of like overwhelming. I could kind of see what was going on. Yeah, no, it was an incredible experience.
So,
really.
so obviously, as you were at Heriot already, you were pretty committed to that kind of
I had decided
anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That was the way we were going to go. But
so it wasn't like the deciding factor. But
no,
how much did it help? Would you say in terms of like?
I think just with the confidence thing, it was like, right, you can do this. You haven't just sort of blagged your way onto a course, and who knows whether anything will come of it. It was like, right, there is the possibility of actually turning this into a thing. So yeah, it was more that really, I think.
Awesome. I remember at the time, because I don't think I didn't enter the competition, but it was around about the time that I sort of started getting more seriously into kind of all grain brewing, I think. In fact, it must have been very early.
What year is this?
For me? This is 2016.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But I remember the name of the beer because I remember reading about the winner of it. So it was,
That's mad, isn't it?
I obviously did a little bit of sneaky Googling here to get the name of the beer up. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, I remember that actually being
I think the name helped.
Time, so.
And I honestly think
it's very memorable. And also just the fact that it was like a rose petal infused beer as well, which was very unusual. So.
And I thought Waitrose, I mean, that wasn't part of the idea of it, but I did think afterwards maybe that probably didn't hurt either. But yeah, I would say don't ever underestimate the importance of making it look nice. As I say, I was really pleased with just the way the whole thing looked, and having since seen like sort of competition entries come through, and some of them have still got like the original label of that, and it's kind of it's like, come on, just put a bit of effort in and you scrub the label off and make make it look nice, because you have half the battle is before you've even opened the thing.
Yeah, it's
presentation. If it looks
absolutely
cool in your hand, you're already thinking this person's obviously cares enough to make it look nice. It's probably going to be okay, at least inside. So yeah, I would encourage anyone doing anything like that to spend a bit of time and effort on the aesthetics as well as what's inside the bottle.
Yeah. We've had many conversations about packaging, and there's like a technical aspect to it in terms of the actual impact on the beer, but I think there's definitely a psychological impact in terms of, even for homebrew competitions where it's like plastic versus a glass bottle, there's a little bit of a, unconscious bias, I think.
We've done tests.
Well, no, like I said, there's a technical reason why you might not want to do that, but I think there's also, because of that, even if the beer has got there in, decent condition, judges might look at a plastic bottle slightly, as much as they might try to be impartial, they might just have a preconceived idea of what the beer standard might be like out there versus a glass.
Packaging's huge in all across the board. It's enormous. It was the biggest learning curve, I think, for me. It's not to sort of play down obviously the bit that goes before that, because there's an awful lot going on there as well. But I would say the most difficult thing to get right on the commercial brewery side of things was the packaging. That was the bit that took, especially doing it not exactly on a shoestring, but without being able to just sort of go and buy the sort of fanciest equipment. You really have to kind of put a lot of effort and thought into how you do your packaging, and it is huge. You can ruin a beer very easily. It's all too easy to sort of just allow a bit of oxygen to come in at the wrong time, and it just sort of negates all the good stuff you've done up until that point. And that takes a little while. It takes a bit of, just trial and error. You can.
Do you not find with the can conditioning though that it helps, because then that kind of scavenges some oxygen?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah, but it's not like a free pass.
Exactly.
There's a certain amount. If it goes in, it's never coming out again, or the damage will have already been done. So the learning curve we had there was when we first started doing the kind of hoppy pale stuff. That was where it sort of showed it up.
Yeah.
It was only when we started, like before that,
because it was bottling, and you had like
we were bottling,
sort of, or was it the
Vigo kind of gravity filler thing? Yeah, that's right. And that was fine. And then we shifted to canning, and it was fine too. But it was only really when I sort of had that moment of clarity that we could do hoppy pales and still do all the other stuff, and we'd still, be the kind of brewery that we wanted to be.
Yeah.
Those first few hoppy pales, we kind of did them the same way as we'd done everything else, which was, the way that you'd set out to do it. Obviously, you purge the can and put the lid on, and they were just coming out not great, and funnily enough, as you were saying, if you left it long enough, actually it sorted itself out. But it was never quite 100%, even after it had gone through, through the process. And fair play to you, and he kind of did his usual sort of OCD thing of just going after it like a kind of rabbit after a whatever. And he came up, well, basically he modified our canning machine. So we could, after purging it, it would fill, and then we would purge again, which created a layer of foam, because we're filling the can flat, obviously. So it wouldn't normally fill with a layer of foam, but you sort of think, having purged it, it goes to the level it's going to go to, and there's like, I don't know, not much, a millimeter maybe of space between the top of the, and you think, well, that must be CO2. Pop the lid on, boom.
No,
it isn't. No, that's right. So Ewan basically modified the canning machine, so we get the extra purge. You get a bit of foam, put the lid onto the foam, and ever since then it's been great. Yeah.
Because how big is the cannon then? Is it just one can at a time, or how does it work?
Yeah.
Two can, yeah.
So Ewan stands and does the filling bit, and I do the seaming. It's the one thing that we do, like the two of us, production wise. So it's a pretty.
It's labor intensive. Yeah,
it is. It's not quite like there's a sort of more labor intensive way, which is the kind of. I forget now what it's called, but there's like a sort of machine that's about, I don't know, $4,000 or something, which is more labor intensive than the one we're basically the one up from that kind of thing.
Okay.
It's fine. We're a pretty small brewery. It's
because what's your batch? I don't think we've discussed
600 liters is our batch size. So we'll generally. Sometimes we do like a full batch into cans. Usually we take a few kegs off, and we end up doing like between 1,000 and 1,200 cans. Ewan will start setting up around about 8:30, 9 o'clock. Usually we're ready to go about 10, half past, and then we'll be finished by about 3-ish. So I'm just involved from sort of, let's say, 10:30 till 3. So it's kind of half a day for me, whereas previously with the bottles, it would be like a full day, and Ewan would have to do a bit the day before and the day after. So that's a huge plus, obviously. That was kind of why we went for canning in the first place. We one day, quite a long time ago, we kind of looked at what was going on in the brewery and realized that we weren't going to ever be able to make a profit because there just weren't enough hours in the week, kind of thing. When we were filling bottles, we just couldn't make enough beer the way we were doing it. So that was why we went and got the can. It wasn't nice as it is, obviously, to have cans, and there was a big sales element to it, and all sorts of other good reasons to be in cans. But the original kind of impetus for it was just to sort of shorten the amount of time it takes to package the beer. But yeah, lots of other good things came of it too.
And the labels, do they go on by hand, Phil?
They do, yeah. It's just one of those kind of, put the can on, and off it goes. That's easy, that doesn't take long at all. Yeah. And I've got 2 kids, one 12 and one 16, and they're both pretty good at labeling cans now.
Nice. And your pocket body,
really,
kids. Yeah. Kids, I got a job for you.
That's right.
If you want to spend time with Daddy, then you need to come and help.
When school holidays comes around.
Lucky them.
They can choose to get paid in EA points or Fortnite.
That's that, Robux.
Exactly.
They're well conversant with that.
You wait, Phil. It's only 2 years until your eldest is 18, and then it's going to be like, Dad's
Van
got
driver.
beer.
Yeah. Well, Dad owns a brewery, so we're sorted.
Happy days.
Yeah, no, it's not escaped my attention, that's for sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
That's coming.
So, Phil, how do you talk to us about how you go about constructing recipes? Do you do that collaboratively with Ewan, or do you tend to have predominant creative?
That's an interesting one, because I obviously began doing it all myself, and very much enjoyed that sort of side of things, and it is still very collaborative. I suppose it's the sort of thing that you kind of are fairly protective over. But Ewan came in and he had a couple of good recipes, like German ale, the Kolsch. He had an idea for that, and he did it as a trial. We were like, oh man, that's superb. Let's just go for it. And so that, at that point, I suppose he kind of earned the right to have equal say, really. And now, because of that, it's almost just the path of not least resistance, but just whichever makes life easiest, So sometimes I'll have a kind of strong idea of the way I think a beer should be. If I don't, then Ewan does it. Basically, I suppose is kind of how it goes. We both have a pretty strong alignment on what we want as the end product. So there's no kind of friction around all that stuff. I think we both can rely on one another to sort of do whatever it needs, whatever it takes to sort of make the beer that we want to end up with. So yeah, I guess out of convenience, he'll fairly often do most of the work. And then sometimes I'll chip in. Sometimes I'll say, right, I don't think I'll ever sort of go, right, I think it should be 40% this and 10%. I don't usually get sort of as granular as that, but I might well kind of go, right, well, I think this is sort of the way we should do it. But more often than not, we'll talk about the sort of beer it should be, more sort of the qualities it should have, and the kind of end product we want to end up with. And then Ewan will go away and kind of do the sort of how we get there. He's good at it, and he's got the time compared to, or at least that's more what he sort of spends his time doing. Like Tenements is a good example. So we decided to do a sort of everyman kind of lager. We wanted to have like a sort of lager that could potentially be a kind of permanent line type of a thing. And being in Glasgow, we were like, let's take Tenants as a sort of starting point, and let's do a sort of kind of a craft version of that. So we weren't trying to replicate Tenants, but obviously we called it Tenements. And we
because that's quite it's in Glasgow, tenement flats are like
exactly
thing.
So the whole thing is, it's like supposed to be an affectionate and respectful tribute to Tenants, really, that kind of talks about Glasgow and gives you the kind of good stuff from Tennant's, but it's, you know, properly lagered, and it's Vienna malt, and it's a nice sort of version of, I mean, Tennant's is great, obviously, but it's more of a sort of crafty, small version, a small batch version of Tennant's kind of thing. So we had that conversation. We sort of said, right, this is what we want, and then Ewan just went away and kind of made the recipe. You know, it was his idea to use Vienna, which kind of means you end up with roughly the right color for Tennant's, because we wanted it to sort of resemble it, and he sort of gave it a little bit of I forget now what it was, but it's something a little bit darker to sort of just get it exactly right. And flavor wise, you know, he basically sort of formulated it the way it kind of needed to be. But we had the initial conversation together, and
did you ferment it with the Nottingham ale yeast, cold
Is
fermented?
that what they use?
Suppose, right, this is what we've heard from certain people anyway, that's
Nottingham. Really?
Yeah,
That's
it's like an ale yeast that's cold fermented.
Right. Okay. I mean, I've used. So we use. I don't know if we still do, but when I first did the export, like the 80, I used Nottingham for that, because if you use Nottingham at like 10, 12 degrees, it is basically like a lager yeast. So that's really interesting. Right. I didn't know that. If I had known that, we might well have done that. But no, I think we used 3470.
It's a very versatile yeast, isn't it?
Yeah, I really like it. Yeah, it's great. The only, like, Ewan's not such a big fan because maybe not at low temperatures, but it is really lively, and it can. Two of our fermenters are open top, so it can cause a lot of mess in the breweries. So we tend to steer clear of it for that reason.
You don't want too much clear up, do you? We actually haven't talked about this beer at all, have we?
Maybe
we probably ought to.
I think we're about to see it off, so let's have a little bit of discussion of that. I mean, the hop choices on this are a good place to start, maybe, because it's I guess a little bit unusual. There's a couple in there that you wouldn't necessarily see.
Go on, remind me. I can't remember actually what.
So you've got Simcoe, Cashmere, and Calypso.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
So tell us about the hop choices.
Well, first of all, this is the second iteration, I suppose. So the first one was, I think it was Eldorado and something else, Citra probably. Calypso we came to from Jake up front. We did a collab with him, and in fact, we're just about to do another one. He put Calypso in there. We really liked it. Cashmere, I forget where that came from. I think we were just sort of looking to change things up a little bit. Simcoe, we're huge fans of. Can't make a bad beer with Simcoe. It's not overthought, I don't think, really. We tried to sort of not do the totally obvious thing, but we also like to
include anyone.
That's right. Yeah, we have. I mean, you can't go wrong, can you?
No. But
Citra
it won't taste much difference to a lot of other beers.
Just tastes like everything else.
Plus something else.
No, we try and kind of always be a little bit off the beaten track, as I say.
Yeah.
And, Calypso's a really good hop, and Cashmere too. You know.
So, I mean, it's got a little bit more. It's kind of interesting beer. It's got a bit more of a old school US pale vibe to it, I think.
Grapefruit.
Nice grapefruit. I think
we tend to
commented about the bitterness being like quite, nice firm bitterness to it as well.
But the malt, I think that malt just brings a nice sweetness to it that it just balances with the bitterness as well.
It is beautifully balanced. Like I've just sat here, just checked, like
it's very drinkable,
and it's just it's a really lovely balanced, lovely drop of beer.
Oh, nice one.
It's just slipping down.
Yeah, no, that extra pale Maris Otter is a big part of it. You know, it just gives everything a firm foundation.
Yeah, that you can
where you
stack the hops up against. Yeah,
and it's got like a sort of, it's got a tiny little bit of pine, a little bit herbaceous. It's got a nice grapefruit. It's got a nice fruit vibe. It's kind of got like a bit of everything in there. It's just a really, really lovely rounded US pale.
Nice. Yeah.
Love it. Really, really good.
definitely that orangey.
I haven't used
grapefruit.
Calypso hops, but I'm definitely thinking about getting some.
No.
Yeah, we did a saison with Calypso. We do like sort of a saison with a different dry hop roughly once a year. And last year we did Calypso, and that worked out really well. It's a good kind of not over the top, but has a lot of those kind of punchy, fruity elements. And again, nothing that you don't want, and it's a little bit different to the usual stuff. So why not?
It's kind of described as being crisp, fruity aroma, flavor of apples, pears, stone fruit, and lime citrus.
Yeah,
Obviously with that cashmere as well, that's going to be like amping that kind of lime citrus flavor forward, without actually using a hop like Citra or Mosaic that can be very dominant. It almost overpowers a beer at times, and I think that was the right move not to go with one of those mega power hops.
Yeah, we tend to not do that sort of stuff that much. Just again for the balance, we tend to always be sort of 10 years behind fashion, and we're quite happy there.
But Phil, you're being different, and then that allows people to come and find something that's not normal on the shelf. Everyone's trying to be the same, and you're just that little bit different.
Yeah,
and
it works,
Yeah.
A really successful beer we did fairly recently was the West Coast Red. That was universally kind of enjoyed, and it was all the kind of Columbus Centennial Chinook type hops. There might have been something slightly more. We might have put Strata in there. I can't remember, but it was pretty much the old school stuff, and everybody loved it. And you do kind of think maybe we are just sort of running a bit too fast. Just hold off and just stick with the stuff that because people like that in the early 2000s, and they like it now. So let's you don't have to kind of run past that.
It doesn't all need to be that hazy sort of.
No, that's right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I always kind of have to make it very clear that I really enjoy those kind of beers as well. But it's the whole thing with Simple Things really is like we don't all have to just do the one same thing. I used to use this kind of wine analogy a lot. Like it doesn't all have to be Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. There's like Gewürztraminer as well, and there's plenty of people who like a glass of that, as now and again, or maybe all the time, whatever. But point is, just because those two are really nice doesn't mean there's lots of other things that are not also really nice.
Yeah, and I am pleased to see that your West Coast Red IPA is in the seasonal 12 pack.
Well, it is, but unfortunately it's all run out. So I'm going to be updating that next week. Sadly, that's all gone. So yeah, don't buy that expecting a can of it.
Next time, Phil.
Yeah,
next time.
We will be brewing that again as soon as possible because it went down really well. Yeah,
I was on your website as soon as you mentioned about that 80 shilling mix firm, and I went on the tab that said beers, and I was scrolling through thinking, flipping hell, you've got a lot of different beers on, but actually I wasn't on the web shop.
Yeah, but that's not the shop.
The impression that I got, like the breadth of beers that you got on, and the impression I get first, like it's a lot of classic styles with a bit of a difference.
Yeah, that's it.
But just brewed really well.
That's the idea.
And I love that.
Nice one. Yeah.
And I think Chris is probably going to be a bit upset that he's not here because I know
Chris
he's
other guy in the podcast.
Right, okay.
He loves to make, as a homebrewer, he loves to make really drinkable balanced beers.
Nice.
So I think he's going to be a bit upset that he's missed this one, but never mind. He'll catch up. Have we cracked the pale ale?
Yes.
Oh, right.
It's very different.
Yep. We're yes. So
You'll lead
this
us in,
one now.
Tricky.
So we've got the STF Pale Ale. We're now creeping up in the percentage. So we're up to 5.6 on this one. Again, interesting
The aroma's mental.
interesting hop combination on this one. So we're very much leaning into the modern European hop varieties here with Hallertau Blanc, Barbe Rouge, which is one I'm not familiar with myself, but yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit more about that. And then Mandarina Bavaria, which I think most of us have probably heard of. So a couple there that
I love Hallertau Blanc. That's like Nelson.
we're aware of.
in
Barbe
Germany.
Rouge, not so much. Is Barbe Rouge a French hop?
It is.
I'm
Yeah,
imagining?
yeah. Obviously, Red Beard. I don't know why they went for that name, but it's a cool hop, and it really sort of punches through because we don't use an awful lot of it, and it's in the boil as opposed to a dry hop. But you get this nice sort of strawberry vanilla kind of character, and it makes this beer, really different. So this is one of our. So this and Twisted Pilsner are our kind of core range beers. We don't do them in keg, but they're always available in can. And this is kind of an evolution of the first beer, that we released, which at the time we called European Pale Ale. And possibly I should really still call it European Pale Ale, but I kind of just like it sort of says a lot about the brewery, that this is our pale ale, and it is completely different to most other pale ales. And it's 5.6%. This goes back to when I was quite ideological about the brewery. I was like, right, a pale ale should really be sort of, a good 5 and a bit percent. And IPAs are 6.5 to 7. It was very much that kind of things as I saw them. And I've seen no reason to change it, basically. It's got elements of British beer, European beer, American beer. It's meant to be a bit hazy. It's meant to be aromatic and hoppy in the way that a sort of new world pale ale is. But it's also meant to have the sort of old school, there's a little bit of kind of Worthington White Shield about it as well, kind of thing. It's got a fairly decent amount of bitterness, not quite IPA bitterness, but it's there. And the European hops, they're just completely, they give you something completely different. It was a bit of a kind of homebrew project. It's something I did a lot as a homebrew, should we say, was to try to create something like an American style pale ale with only European hops. And I went through lots of different, that's where I kind of dismissed all the kind of modern English sort of, and this was a long time ago. So, that since then, I think the likes of Harlequin and Jester have come along and they're a bit more kind of closer to what they should be. But I went with Hallertau Blanc, Mandarina Bavaria, and Barbe Rouge. Again, coming back to that thing of they've got good stuff in them, but nothing there that I don't want. There's a little bit of kind of earthiness and a little bit of floralness, but there's nothing kind of unpleasant. It's different, but it's not unpleasant. There's no kind of like misplaced spiciness or diesel or anything like that.
See, when you put your nose in a hop bag and you get that lupulin sort of like almost like a kind of honky lupulin sort of sweaty thing. It's kind of like that. This one.
It's a complex beer, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like it gives me like different vibes. Like it gives me like a kind of best bitter like moment.
Yeah.
And then it gives me like a US
sweet
kind of pale moment.
on the flavors, like
it's kind of like I get all these different impressions of the beer, but it must have been really hard to brew a beer with that many different dimensions without ending up just with a really muddy beer, like a really confused beer. But this isn't confused.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really set out to get here, I suppose, in some ways. It's just kind of, it's a difficult one to describe. But I like it is idiosyncratic, And I suppose there's something about that is why we still have it as one of our two core beers. It's kind of like saying this is the sort of brewery we are, I suppose, and we could have like US Pale or whatever as the other kind of core range beer. We probably would sell more of it, but it's important to me to sort of go, right, this is what can be done with a pale ale. And I know it's not going to be I don't want to drink this all night. It's not my favorite beer either.
Yeah,
but
it's quite thick.
It is, yeah. It's different. It's kind of like, I'm gonna say iconic, but which sounds like a bit mad. But I know that there isn't another beer out there, and I also know that we sell a lot of it. So I know loads of people like it.
Yeah,
and I know that it doesn't sort of follow anybody else's rules, and that's kind of what I really like about it.
And there's a firm bitterness to this beer as well. And it's not one of those upfront bitternesses. Well, but there's a bit of upfront bitterness, but it's kind of a bitterness that builds, which I really like. It's one of those beers that kind of brings you back in.
Yeah.
It's really enjoying
sort of makes you sort of stop and think a little bit. It's not just a sort of mindless beer. It's there's something about it that kind of draws your attention in and makes you think what's going on here a little bit.
Do you guys get that sweaty gym sock thing on the nose?
No.
I'm getting like, it's almost like it's literally when I've smelt, like when I go with leaf peeling sort of right on the nose, it's like that sort of real pungent hop. No?
Yeah, I get that pungent hop.
Yeah.
Aroma, but I'm not perceiving that as like
it's
sweaty
like
gym sock. I'm perceiving that more as
what would you call that?
I think it's more those sort of nuanced fruit flavors coming from the various varietals. But a lot of people in the chat are calling out like strawberry sweets, candy floss, bag of penny sweets, kind of.
That's what I get from
it. There's also something that's a little bit old school about it that's kind of making them feel reminiscent about that.
Well, that's good, because all of that stuff is what we're trying to do, really, or what that beer is all about. Yeah,
it's definitely like a pretty strong like orange vibe.
Yeah, the mandarina. Yeah.
I reckon probably like slightly amped by that Hallertau Blanc as well, because it's going to be giving it that little bit of top note from the sort of
whenever you use that, you get the white wine grape thing. Yeah,
a little bit of gooseberry. Definite orange rind.
Oh, massive. That's the flavour. The flavour's dominated with that orange.
There's a lot going on in that beer.
Yeah.
It's cool. I like it. But there's a lot going on, but it's not muddled.
Right.
I like it. It's good beer. Very good.
Tricky, what's your thoughts?
Realised I was muted for about 5 minutes there. Sorry, guys.
You've been very quiet. You're just drinking heavily in the corner.
Just trying to plough through before we run out of time. But no, there's lots of different stuff going on there. I'm struggling a little bit to sort of pick out what particular flavour I get from this one, because lots. I think the orange thing is definitely in there. You do write that on the can, because that's literally the first thing you put, sort of orange zest, grape.
Is it? I've not read the can for ages, actually.
Interesting. It's being honest, I preferred the US Pale, so I mean that was my preference out the two. But that one's definitely I'll go with Owen's description of complex.
Yeah, it's complex. It's definitely different, isn't it, to the US Pale, right? But I really like it. It's given me lots of different faces. as I go through the beer, and I actually really like that. I like a complex beer.
Mhm.
You know, I like mixed ferm beers. I like,
Yeah, because
you
it's
know,
got that sort of.
complicated, slightly more challenging beers that make me think. That's not everyone's bag. So yeah, there you have it. So Phil, just back to some probably more like slightly technical, maybe not technical, but brewing type questions. Do you use, like, we've talked a bit about some of the malts you tend to use. So you tend to use Marisol, you're looking for the kind of finest base malts there. Have you got any like real preference specialty malts that you tend to go towards?
We are fairly kind of anti-crystal. We don't use crystal very much at all. That's something that you and I both are fairly kind of aligned on. Now and again, you know, where it's appropriate, we'll stick
80
it
shilling, maybe.
No, funnily enough. So
Ambos?
yeah. So the answer to the question really is Simpson's Aromatic. Where a beer calls for crystal, use Simpson's Aromatic instead.
Right, okay.
Nice.
So like Best Bitter, that's Marisol and Aromatic. And it does the sort of crystal thing without the sort
Being
of
cloying
boring,
sweetness.
twiggy, cloying thing. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our kind of secret
Top
weapon,
tip.
really. Yeah, definitely. We don't use an awful lot of Simpsons malt. Excuse me. We use almost exclusively Crisp and Viaman. Excuse me. But yeah, there's no other thing to compare to Simpsons Aromatic, and DRC as well is a great malt.
Fan.
Yeah, yeah, they're probably the two I would say, and it kind of galls me a little bit because yeah, Crisp are number one, but we got to go to Simpsons now and again.
Yeah. Do you tend to use a lot of adjuncts in the beers? You know, like wheat, oats.
We do where appropriate. Yeah, we use a fair bit of wheat. We use a fair bit of oats. We use spelt in saisons, rye in the smoked rye porter, which we're coming on to next. Yeah, not tons. Yeah, mostly we stick to barley, I suppose.
Nice. And you talked a bit about your different yeasts that you you talked a bit about your mixed ferm house culture. Do you have a whole house culture, or do you tend to sort of vary it dependent on, because obviously you've got quite a breadth of styles going on, so obviously that's gonna lead into different use of yeasts.
For the kind of wild style stuff, we definitely do vary it. So the export, we use that, let's call it house culture, that was basically propagated up from dregs of Orval and a couple of other things. We've also got, although I'm not sure if we haven't kind of let that go now, but I did when I was at Harveston, I basically created like a sort of sourdough thing from the malt around the mill, and that worked really well.
Effectively capturing the
basically
local
just sort of,
terroir.
There was
nice.
a layer of dust all around the mill, and created a sourdough out of that, and we used that for I forget now which one it was, but I think there was a sort of fairly regular sort of series of mixed ferm stuff that we did with that, and then we did a beer initially with Cool Shipyard, which was a saison, which was like two different lab bought cultures, like Omega, or I forget now, the White Labs, what are they called? The East Bay. I think it was two different East Bay things, and that was cool. So yeah, other times we've kind of just gone with putting a sort of lowish ABV into like a cask and taking whatever's from there. We did the Old Red with Henry from Sunken Nave, which we did with Rosalaire. So that was another sort of lab.
You're
Yeah, I've used that
propagating like
before.
liquid. It's all liquid that you're using then.
Well, yeah, pretty much, I suppose. Yeah. On that, certainly on the kind of the sort of mixed firm type stuff, and then on the clean stuff, we have a fairly even split of like just the USO5 dried type stuff, and then
Yep.
we pretty often get liquid pitches from Sherbrew, Chris, who does a great job of any kind of any clean yeast that you can think of that you need.
Where's Sherbrew based? Who's
down
that?
south? It's just like a guy who basically propagates yeast up.
Okay.
And so you can phone him and say any sort of commercially available strain, and he'll send you a couple of 5-liter tubs of it, and it goes.
Gotcha.
So like German ale used to be able to get that the yeast that we use for that, the Kolsch yeast. They discontinued that, but as they discontinued it, we sent enough down to Chris that he was able to sort of bank it, and now whenever we brew that, we use a liquid pitch from him, and it has, it's the German ale. It was already all about the yeast, and it was, a tasty beer. But I think since they discontinued it, and now we get a liquid pitch from Chris instead, it's slightly better, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Just because it's that, it's not the first generation,
exactly.
You're already a generation in, kind of thing.
So you're not doing any of your own propagation. You're not buying homebrew pouches and growing them up. You're getting a dude
or washing
down
stuff
south
in acid.
legwork for you. Nice.
Yeah, no, we don't have the space to do that.
Yeah, because it's not massive, is it?
No, it's tiny. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, the only thing we would potentially do there is we'll brew back into so if we've got a beer, or two beers anyway, that both use the same yeast, and the first one isn't dry hopped, then we can leave the yeast cake in the bottom of the fermenter and go back in, and that saves a few quid. But that's about as far as we'll go with it, really.
Yeah. I feel. Is this like your full-time job, or you?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, it's a full-time job for myself and Ewan, and we both got like young families, and we pay ourselves in just about okay wage. So I'm proud of the fact that a 600-liter, which is a small brewery, we do, and we haven't got a tap room, which would help if we had one. But yeah, we managed just about to sort of support two families from.
Have you got any thoughts on that, Phil? Like expanding or like bigger premises? And
so just this week, actually, we've bought 2 new tanks. There's been a bit of a Glasgow tank merry-go-round. So Jake up front, he's bought 3 nice new tanks, and we're getting 3 of his slightly less nice new tanks. And then we've moved on a couple of our tanks somewhere as well, basically. So that'll allow us to obviously brew a little bit more every month, which won't be earth shattering, but at the same time it'll make a difference, and just allow us to put a wee bit more aside every month, and hopefully before too long we'll have enough of a kind of cushion or resources one way and another to look at basically paying a little bit more rent and moving to a slightly bigger place, at which point hopefully we can look at doing a tap room as well, because it would be fantastic, not necessarily like a
Friday Saturday sort of thing.
Exactly. Even just like every other Saturday or something, just would be great. Or just to be able to even do events, where we are. I always thought once we got our license to be able to sell, through the website, which is what our license allows us to do, I did think we'd still be able to get the occasional license and be able to do, an open house every season or whatever. But
Mhm.
once you've got a license that allows you to do one thing, the only variation you can have on that in Glasgow, anyway, I don't know if this is the same everywhere, is in time. It's not in what you can do. So once you've got a license that says you can sell via the website, you can't then vary that to say, or even get an occasional license to say, I want to open the place up one Saturday a year even.
Jeez.
And yeah, it's mental, eh? So
Yeah.
we
Not
just
very
literally
flexible
can't
on
do
that front, then, is it?
Really not.
Clearly.
No, it's so annoying.
Support local,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because it would be such a nice thing to be able to just throw the doors open, even like once every 6 months or something, and just like we did in that first place in November,
it was amazing.
Yeah, that's right. Just get people through. So we do now and again, or we have in the past at least, done that. But we literally have to give the beer away, just to sort of have the people, because people do turn up, and we've got like a little community around the brewery people rock up and buy the beer and pay in cash and whatnot. And it'd be so nice to be able to just sort of light a barbecue and, sell a few beers, and not even to make any money necessarily, just to sort of get together. But you can't even do that. It is pretty frustrating.
So
anyway,
I've seen the places I've seen your beers is probably the Shilling in Glasgow. Is that right? Normally on tap in the Shilling, I'll be able to grab one of your beers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Shilling are great. They've been good supporters. Cool Shipyard, Old Toll, brilliant these days. Since Susie's become the manager there, they've been really good supporters.
Nice.
Ben Nevis.
Nice.
Yeah, just the usual kind of places. Yeah.
Good.
Just to dig a little bit deeper into the whole sort of commercial viability. We've had quite a few brewers who have come on the podcast in the last few episodes who have been very much in that kind of like transitional phase between homebrewer and commercial.
First couple of years, first year or so.
And it seems like on the whole, pretty much all of them are, essentially like they've got to work a full-time job and do the brewing as a kind of sideline. Which, obviously, if that's the way you've got to launch the business. But I mean, bearing in mind what you've just said to us, I think the question that I'd like to ask is sort of, do you have any sort of insight into like what would you say is like the tipping point between where you need to be? Maybe it's in terms of volume or something, I don't know, but where do you need to be in terms of how can you make it a viable business in terms of being able to like do it full time like you are, as far as being able to pay a sustainable wage to yourself to make that happen? I mean,
it's difficult to say, but
I know there's not going to be a sort of one size fits all for that.
Put it this way, at 600 litres with 2 employees, I think we're doing exceptionally well to be able to make it work.
And obviously that's going to be part of like how well your business is doing and how good the beers that you're putting out are as well. So
there's so many different facets to it. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend anybody else to do the same thing. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think you've probably got to go a bit bigger.
12, probably about 12 hectoliter or 20 sort of.
Yeah, that's right. So I remember listening to a podcast with Baron, and
Jack. We've had he's been on.
Right. Oh, really? Right.
Yeah.
So he's like a one guy.
And his farmhouse, his family.
That's right. Yeah. And obviously he's doing.
We're still wondering how he manages to do that. Like, on his own as well.
He just doesn't sleep.
Yeah.
He has a great relationship with Distant Lands, and I think they do pretty much the sales and logistics side of it for him. And also I imagine he has a pretty slick kind of set of equipment and a canning line that more or less operates itself and all the rest of it. But unless you've got that or something along those lines, or a good amount of goodwill, it's not going to be easy. That's for sure. It's not going to be easy one way or another.
Nobody tells us it's easy. It Everyone says it's an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I think the easiest, if there was, it isn't easy, but the easiest way is if you have some kind of direct route to market, i.e. tap room, basically. If you can kind of brew it and sell it at least a good chunk of what you're brewing direct to people who are drinking it there on site. That helps for sure.
That's what one of our friends of the podcast, Martin Hoddenot, who's got Maverick Brewing, that's what he does. He's got his tap room and he opens it at the weekends and kind of has that direct to market sort of thing. And again, he's got a full-time job, but also does this brewery on the side. But I think it's to grow it enough to then that he can actually sort of move towards. But he's what? How many years is he? First or second year now? I think he's
Second
done
year,
very
second
early
year.
on,
Yeah.
Second year.
But it must be very encouraging for you, Phil, that you are, essentially viable as it is without the tap room. So that, like you said, there's room for expansion there. And,
but it's taken 5 years of really hard work. And no small amount of nerve-wracking, life-shortening.
No doubt, especially given what's happened during that 5 years. Right?
Still doing all right up top there, Phil. So.
Well, that's just there's some bare patches there if you look close enough.
I got here without even launching a brewery, so
it's not easy is the short answer. And hard work and a bit of luck and a bit of a big part of my luck was getting Ewan involved. He was just exactly the right person at the right time. And we're a good team. If it hadn't been that he was available at that time, things might have been kind of completely different. So there's definitely a bit of luck involved for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, there's a couple of quick fire questions from the chat that I just wanted to cover off with you. Ron Muir asked, "Do you crush your own malt or buy it pre-crushed?"
Pre-crushed. Don't have room for a mill, sadly.
Excellent. A listener joining from Slovenia asked, "Have you ever tried old or new Slovenian Styrian hops?"
Yes, not old. I don't know why we would use old hops, but love Styrian hops. As I say,
I think maybe he was referring to sort of the more traditional Slovenian varieties.
Right, okay.
All right, aged.
Yeah, right.
For the funky beers.
So, we use Celea a lot, which is a Slovenian hop. Goes back to the Harveston days. Celea is possibly my favorite hop. It's great in all sorts of things. Celea was used a lot at Harveston. Bitter and Twisted and Schahalian both use Celea. And then I got taken to Slovenia by Charles Farham. And
that's in Landlord as well, I think, isn't it? I believe.
Possibly.
Burning Sky also use it a lot.
And I think it's in Taras Bulba. It's in all the good beers. It's a superb hop. The newer ones, I'm not, a bit like the newer English ones, I'm just not as keen on the sort of European hops that try to be big and
American.
Fruity and juicy. Yeah, exactly. Just embrace the good stuff that is already there, But Styrian Golden, Celea, big fan.
You're right. A bit of a traditionalist there.
I am, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that was probably the only two questions we had in the chat. Rob Miller also asked, "Phil, do you put your hops into a hop calculator before experimenting?" Or perhaps we could expand that question just as to how you experiment with new hops.
So when we are experimenting with hops, what we will quite often do is take off liter bottles of something relatively kind of I'm trying to find the word, but modest in its kind of hop, so like a best bitter or a golden ale or something like that, and we'll dose liter bottles with whatever hops we're looking into, and we'll just do sort of sensory on that basically.
That makes sense.
Find that a good way of doing it.
Do you do a lot of that all at once, or do you tend to keep it quite?
We don't do an awful lot of that. Yeah, if we've got like a particular beer that we want to sort of dial the hops in on, you mostly go by kind of instinct and experience these days. But certainly in the early days, we would kind of be a bit more on that. We would maybe do like 10 different litre bottles of different varieties and different grams per litre of the different varieties. But I don't know, I think we've probably done enough of that now that we have enough of a feeling for it, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, listen, Phil, I think we're all out of questions.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Quickly talk about the porter before.
Oh yeah, go on. Yeah,
Oh, I haven't even opened the porter yet.
Right. Owen, it is amazing. I don't know, Chicky.
I love a smoked beer.
I think this is brilliant. I also think it's probably a beer that might divide opinion because it's got smoked malt in it, and obviously smoked beers can be a bit of a.
Oh, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. But I say that not just smoked; it's also got rye in it. Which,
the rye I think is for me more the kind of divisive thing. I'm not 100% sure because it does give it a sort of spiciness. The smokiness gives it a sort of roundedness, which I think goes quite well with the porter thing. But the rye, it does sort of
it's the rye that lingers
quite a bit, you know.
The rye lingers.
It does. Yeah. It's
but it goes with the hops.
Ingredient.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yes.
Nice one. So this, a bit like the pale ale, like the pale ale was the first one that we released. And then this was actually the second one. And it was the first one that we brewed. I brewed this first and then released it second. And we've never brewed it again until now. And
oh, wow.
We did it as a sort of 5th year sort of anniversary special.
Big ideas.
Basically. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it went down well 5 years ago, and it's gone down well again. This time. I'm really pleased with the way it's come out.
Yeah, I love the smokiness to it. It's, and it's not like sometimes when you have a smoked beer, it's like it's smoke. That's not what it. It's like this sort of nice balance with everything else. So you've got
it's
that
in there as an element of
chocolatiness.
It.
And then
do you know
you've got
roughly what amount of smoked malt might be in this beer at all?
I don't. I'm afraid.
I'm pressing you.
Do you want me to have a look? I can have a.
I mean, if it's not going to take you ages to find out,
let me have a quick look.
Tricky's like, I want the details.
I know. I always do this to the guys. It's like.
Let's see.
But it's. I mean, I'm going to take a punt and say we're probably between 15 and 20% here in terms of.
That's the number I had in my head, 15%. And it's not. What I kind of like.
It's on the nose.
On your point, Andy, is like sometimes that smoked malt just adds a little nuttiness for me.
Oh. Right, so it's 38.5%.
Oh wow, really? That
which
much?
Is
wow.
Surprising to me actually. The thing with smoked malt is as well, it's a little bit variable with regard to what you get back from the malt. I think the first time we did it, it was more smoky. I think the smoked malt we got this time wasn't as smoky as the first time. So yeah, maybe
was it Bamberg?
Yeah. It's the Bamberg beach smoked malt.
Beach smoked malt. Yeah,
I'll give you the.
You get that vibe. You
the
get
grist, if you like. It's 15% lager malt, 12.8% rye, 10% naked oats, 10% pale chocolate, 5% brown, 5% chocolate rye, and then 2.6%.
Oh, chocolate rye is a nice malt.
Yeah.
Underused.
Yeah. Oh, about black painting as well.
A little bit of that. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, I mean it's a deeply dark. It's quite a dark porter, isn't it? There's just tiny red hues coming through the glass.
It's full on flavour, really tasty. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love it.
If you don't like smoked beers, it might be.
This might be the gateway.
Well, I think there's maybe a case for that
because
I think the rye kind of hides itself.
Yeah, it does.
Under
you
there.
think?
Yeah. I wouldn't.
Because it's like
if you gave this to me and said it's a smoked porter and it's got no rye in it, I'm not sure I would have gone.
There's rye
in it.
But it's the hops. The hops and the rye are tying together, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe you could probably. I definitely get the spiciness, and I think you might sort of go, maybe it's the hops that are spicy.
Yeah, but it
carries through the kind of aftertaste a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that could be muddled up quite easily with the smoked malt. It's a cracking beer.
Yeah.
Really nice. What is
Good
it?
one to finish on, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely going to finish me off, Phil.
I told you we could get through the 4 beers before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's actually
Yeah.
quite good.
and,
Yeah.
It's telling about the drinkability, basically.
Yeah. Nice one.
and Phil, tell us if we're still prattling on and you want to get on
No,
with your
that's
evening.
cool.
But
Yeah, it's fine.
I noticed the family's not piled in behind you.
No, they've not. Amazingly, yeah, they must be enjoying
Must know.
fish and chips.
Oh, it's
somewhere.
6%. Very good.
Where does it say that? Oh, it's up the top.
Right
There
at
it
the top.
is. Yeah,
Right
yeah.
at the top.
6%.
And I love the can art.
Wow.
It's definitely got like quite old school 60s psychedelia vibes.
Yeah, the C&I thing. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
It's very like I've got a Jimi Hendrix poster up here. It's pretty reminiscent actually.
Right.
Yeah. Actually,
nailed that.
even with the font and stuff on there, that could be like a 60s kind of gig
Yeah,
poster,
yeah.
couldn't it? Or something?
Is that?
Yeah,
is,
no,
what's? Have you got that? What's the? How can art?
So that was a conversation with, if you remember, Ride Brewing from Glasgow.
Yes,
Dave Lanigan.
Dave Lanigan. Yeah,
So when I
he's away
left
up north now.
he's in Gear. Yeah. that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So is it not Gia Brun or something like that now?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I left Harveston and was about to start the brewery, I had somebody kind of lined up to do the design, but they were pretty bad at like ever getting back to me. Like the stuff was good, but he just never kind of got back to me. And I was saying to him, look, we're not far off actually having to send stuff to a printer, and it just wasn't happening. I was chatting to Dave, and he's like, "Oh, you should speak to Neil, this guy who lives in Glasgow." So I went and met him in the Hidden Lane where his studio was at the time, and we just sat down for 2 or 3 hours, and it was just a great conversation. I was like, "This is what I think I want the brewery to be all about," and I just sort of said the same thing as I said to you tonight about the sort of things that were important to us, and he just took it all on board and did the first set of bottle labels, and he's done everything ever since, basically.
Is that who Dave used to use then?
No, it isn't. But Dead End Brew Machine.
Yeah.
So Chris uses him and a couple of other people. He does a lot of work for distilleries. He's just a brilliant designer.
Graphic design.
And so I'll say, look, this is what we need, and he sends it back, and that's
Sweet.
it. We don't. That's what I enjoy about it. Like the stuff that I get from him is as unfiltered as the kind of beer that we, I don't mean unfiltered, obviously.
But he's got it's almost like he's got a feel for all your artwork.
Yeah. As you say, the whole idea of the brewery really is that kind of traditional with a modern twist. And he's kind of got that absolutely nailed with his design stuff.
Yeah, because your cans will stick out on a shelf because it's got that. It's the look. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's he's a brilliant guy, and hopefully he'll continue doing what he does, because I don't know what we'll do if he does.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I'm certainly not going to start doing it myself. That's for sure.
Definitely get someone to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really enjoying this smoked rye porter. Should we jump to an after party, guys?
Yeah, call it.
Yeah, I think that's about time.
Cool. So, Phil, we very often just host an after party with a lot of the live listeners.
All right.
So, if you are able to come join us and answer any questions and enjoy the chat, then that'd be great.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this is episode 111 in the bag. Woohoo! So we're still going strong. So say goodnight, everyone. Much appreciate, Phil. You've been a great guest. Thanks so much for the beers. Very much
thanks for
appreciate
coming
it.
in and sending the beers.
Thanks for the beers. Thanks for the time. Much
Hope everyone's
appreciated.
enjoyed it. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
Adios.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Cheers.